And now, Deep Thoughts.
Whoa, that's pretty deep.
You are listening to the Deep Thoughts podcast, where each and every episode explores one aspect of the Christian faith a little more deeply. I'm your host, Matt Shantz. This episode is about porn and the damaging effect it has on our brains, souls, and relationships. We address spouses harmed by porn, parents trying to navigate the digital world with their kids, and we provide a blueprint for recovery for those battling porn addiction. We also talk about how the gospel provides forgiving grace to wash us clean and empowering grace to help us fight sin like porn in our lives. My guest is Dave Currie. He is the founder and president of Doing Family Right, which seeks to help people maximize their most important relationships, marriage, family, and God. Doing Family Right's ministry includes live seminars, all sorts of great resources on their website, a counseling center, and recovery groups. You know, on the one hand, the porn industry is massive. In the United States alone, it generates more revenue than CBS, NBC, and ABC combined, and more than all professional football, baseball, and basketball franchises. Worldwide, it generates roughly $100 billion annually. On the other hand, while porn is rampant, addictive, and often a secret struggle, especially in church circles, it's not all bad news. A Christianity Today article by Lyman Stone in 2019 entitled "Conservative Protestant Men Are Still Resisting Porn" reveals that religiously observant Protestants are experiencing a vastly lower rate of pornography use. Christians who attend church regularly statistically view porn less. Said another way, there's hope for those addicted to porn. Victory over this sin is possible. I hope this conversation gives you a full-orbed view of how porn harms and that hope and victory are possible. Thanks for joining me. Let's get started. Well, thanks for coming on my podcast, Dave.
So good to be here. So good.
I got to start by telling an embarrassing story about me, not you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I went out golfing with you a couple summers ago, I think.
Yeah, that was embarrassing.
And Tim Clausen was there, the pastor from Abbotsford.
Yeah.
And we're golfing, and I had these shoes that were a gift that had been given to me. They were these golf shoes. Local company, won't go named. I think we were like 9 holes in, and my feet were just like killing me.
Yeah.
My golf game was terrible, but my feet were killing me. That was my main concern. And I think we got to like the 14th hole, and I couldn't do it anymore. And so you guys were like, just take off your shoes. So I walked barefoot for like the last 5 holes.
Yeah.
Terrible golf game.
Yeah.
You guys looked the part, played the part. I was hacking away and then walking barefoot for the last like number of fairways. Just like, This is the worst.
Yeah, that's a treasured golf game. Just to keep in my back pocket where I can remind you to keep you humble.
I had actually quite a nice couple of games this last summer, but
that's good.
You weren't there to see them.
You got to redeem those. Yeah.
While we were golfing, you were talking about a trip you went on, like a golf trip.
Yeah, actually, Tim and I were on it together. There were 6 of us went to Ireland.
That's unreal.
And it was, for me, a trip of a lifetime to golf. 3 of the 9 courses we golfed on were top 25 in the world. And
wow.
And so it was, and Tim and I, of the 6, were the 2, like, plus 18 handicap, right? These other guys are 7s
so
and 11s, but we had a lot of fun and just really good fellowship and just seeing some beautiful country. And yeah, it was a great time.
Golf is a humbling game.
Oh, it is. It is.
Because you're playing against yourself.
It is terribly humbling.
You're not really playing against others. You're just
no
trying to make a shot. You don't make it. Have you ever lost a club because you or have you ever needed to replace a club? Because
yes,
you threw it in the lake after, or you broke it?
But I broke a club.
Out of anger?
Well, no. No, actually, if I think the one, it was a 5-iron, and I went to hit it, and I struck the ball, but the club head went 80 yards in the same direction as the ball. But literally, I'm holding a stick with no iron at the bottom, and it was some kind of fault. I don't know what it was, but it was plenty ugly.
That's fantastic. And so you have 4 kids, I think.
4 kids, yeah.
All married?
Yeah, all married.
How many grandkids?
13 grandkids. I'm a millionaire because all my family can sit with their feet under the same table and love each other. That makes me a millionaire.
That's the gift.
And so, I'm close to my kids and my in-law kids and 13 beautiful grandkids. And just that's a gift. That's a gift.
What do they call you? Grandpa, Papa?
They call me Jeepa. I'm actually made that name up. I did the letter G and then PA. Why? Because I don't look like a grandpa. I never did.
Yeah.
So I was 50, 51 when I became a grandfather, and I didn't want to be Papa, Grandpa, grandfather. So it was very interesting because I chose Jeepa just to be unique. Okay, you're Jeepa, the letter G, PA, and friends of mine were really good friends with Michael W. Smith, the singer. And the last time he was in Abbotsford, they got me behind the stage pass to meet Michael personally, and we were talking, and he and I both at the time had our first grandchild.
Oh, wow.
And you know what he calls himself? G Daddy. So we were howling because he's a Southern, right? So granddaddy would be normal, right? We don't do that up here,
G-Daddy.
granddaddy. But he became G Daddy, and I was G Pa. Well, we high fived and we laughed because we just thought we were the coolest because he's the only one in his mind that was G Daddy, and I'm the only one in my mind that was G Pa, and so we howled, and so that was a fun moment too.
Emily's parents didn't love the idea of like the traditional grandparent names either. Their grandparent names are I think they take the cake. So Emily's dad is kind of like a wilderness man. He's pretty gruff. He's a manly man. He's not grandpa, he's grumpy. So just called and so the boys just call him Grumps now.
Yeah, Grumps.
They mean it with the most respect.
Totally.
He's Grumps.
Yeah.
Emily's mom gave herself the name Nanny Goat.
Come on.
But now the boys just call her Goaty. So it's like Grumps and Goaty are coming over. It's the weirdest thing. People look at us strange, or they look at the boys strange, like, what?
Why are you calling
Who are they?
Yeah.
But it's stuck, is what it is. It's pretty fun.
That's good. That's
beautiful. We're going to talk a little bit more about your ministry later on, but just to set the table, we're going to talk about porn in this episode. Why would I talk to you about porn? Just talk a little bit about your ministry.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of people that work with men and couples who battle with porn in their life or marriage, they have their own story about recovery, and I've been wondering because I will go to a conference like about 6 years ago. I was down in Carolina area, and there was 800 people from around the world putting our heads and hearts together of how to help the church with the problem of pornography in life and marriage and how it's destroying so many people because it's accessibility and everything. And I found in that group of 800 that there was about 40 to 50 of us that didn't have a direct story related to porn. And I'm thinking, well, what the heck am I doing here, right? Because a lot of people, it's a recovery story. For me, because I've always been known as being the straight shooter guy. Like, I don't beat around the bush. So I can go back to my earliest years of ministry. This is back in the 70s. And I would be talking openly about things people would never talk about. Like, I talk about how to conquer the lust monster. Well, you're going to talk about that? Yeah. And so I've always been kind of, even the tape ministry I had back in the cassette tape era, my tape ministry was called In Your Face Ministries. Okay? So you get the feel. And so I think what's happened is God has opened the door for me to have a ministry into hard areas of people's lives because I'm not afraid to go there and talk. Now, I tell the men, I said, look, I may not have a recovery story of looking at porn and, that kind of struggle, but I said, I think I could be an editor Playboy because I have a creative mind and I've always been really good at the lust side. I don't need magazines. I'm a lustaholic, right? And so if I don't walk circumspectly, if I don't walk wise, if I don't watch my eyes and my heart, I can be looking and scoping and checking out people like everybody else. And so just because I don't have a story of being online looking at porn doesn't mean I haven't had to battle with the lust problem. And to keep my eyes pure and my mind pure. And so just like, that beautiful verse out of, I love Job 31:1, where it says, Job said, and this is the very oldest book in the Bible that we have record of. And here's a man who centuries ago, like maybe 4,000 years ago, said, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Currie did too. Even when I was teaching college as a young professor at 26, and of course, girls 18 to 22 are in their prime, right? That's pretty nice season of life. And I want you to know something. I made a covenant with the Lord that I would not entertain in my mind any kind of controversial before Jesus thought with any of my students, that I would only focus on my wife, Donna Lynn, and I will not cross that line in my mind. And because you draw that line in your mind and won't go there in your mind, what happens is you likely will never be in some door of a bedroom with somebody. Because an affair doesn't start in the door of a house. It starts in the windows of your mind. Way before. Yeah. So there's my story.
Yeah, and I look forward to this conversation a lot. You're such a great resource for this. You did kind of give your age away there by talking about your tape ministry, though.
Yeah, I'm being honest.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Starting just really practically, there's not many people that would argue that porn's good for you. In fact, like statistics are coming, neuroscience, there's websites like Fight the New Drug that talk about the fact that like what porn does is it essentially gives you like a dopamine rush, like you would get with cocaine.
Yes. Actually stronger than cocaine.
And it does stuff to your brain.
Totally.
And it changes that. Can you just talk a little bit, pick up on any of these categories you want, but porn's negative effects, when it physical, emotional, relational, spiritual effect, what does it do to us?
I want you to, first of all, listeners need to pick up on the fact that extra-biblical, non-Christian sources are saying, get off porn. There's at least 2 sites in the U.S. put together by non-believers, but people in their 20s are warning young people, get off porn. Why? Okay, we should have said this is for audience 13 and over, but the point is this. They're saying get off porn because if you get so addicted to porn early, you will not be able to enjoy healthy sex with a real person. You will not be able to do 3-dimensional sex because you're on a 2-dimensional screen and a self-absorbed thing. And so they have these sites basically coaching men, please get off porn. There's a wonderful one called yourbrainonporn.org, and it has a real core of what it does to people as they get into porn. But what happens is it becomes a superhighway. Within the business here, we call it the PMO cycle. Porn, masturbation, orgasm cycle, the PMO cycle. And what happens is the more that happens, let's say a young man at 10 sees porn and looks at it, once a week. And then as he hits puberty and all of a sudden he starts joining those together, what happens over and over, Matt, is this, there's a layering effect. Just like laying repeated wear lines, circuitry in the brain. It's called a neurological pathway. And it becomes a superhighway in the brain that the young brain at 14, 15, 16 has now discovered that this is sex. The brain has now made, that's the snapshot. So even though at 24, 25, he wants to get married and his wife's just a beautiful lady, his mind has said, well, this ain't sex. Sex is what we've been doing for the last 12, 14 years.
That's literally what his brain is telling him.
His brain has actually wired to solo sex, to porn-related sex, or acting out in fantasy towards other people. And of course, it's always easy. He's always the hero. He's always loved. It always works perfect. It's always on his time. And of course, that's exactly how marital love is. No, it's 2 people trying to work things out. And it's very complicated compared to just what he was experiencing all those years. So it's really addictive, and it really creates a neurological pathway that sends him in a direction that's hard to get out of.
So when you're talking about like single young adults, and then on to getting married and stuff like that. As a counselor, and like you've had these conversations with individuals and couples so often, what are you finding are typical scenarios if one or both individuals are coming into the relationship having been addicted to pornography?
Yeah. And I've done some work where both the gal and the guy have struggled with porn, because we're finding a few more girls are looking at porn because they're hearing from the boys that that's what they're doing. So they kind of look to see what's going on, and sometimes they get neurologically hooked too, as opposed to just curious and seeing and go, I don't know if I want to watch this, right? But what we find is young men will say to their fiance, Yeah, I did struggle with that a bit, but I've looked after it. Looked after it means he hasn't looked at it for 6 weeks. He hasn't looked after it. He's addicted as he was when he was 14, 15, 16, 18. He might have had a season where he was maybe free for 2 months and didn't look at porn or masturbate, to his own jollies, as it were. But it's so interesting that they tell, and the spouse says, oh, good, I'm glad you looked after it.
That's literally what I told Emily, and I believed it. Because I'd had like probably a number of weeks, months of success.
Yeah. And so I have repeated, he told me he was behind, and they're 5 years in. Or matter of fact, a sad story, speaking down in southern Alberta, and a young couple, a year and a half married, says, can we talk to you? And we got some real struggles in our marriage. And sure, let's talk. And just the way it worked out, they both wanted to talk to me alone. So, okay, so I get a half hour with each of them. This was after speaking time, and she said, I don't know what's wrong with me. He just doesn't love me. He's not interested in me sexually. And this is just a beautiful bride. Like there's no reason why she isn't just being pursued and cherished by this husband of hers in every way, personally and emotionally and sexually. And she just says, it just feels so terrible. He's not interested in me. And she's just broken, because she has, guys are always into girls and all this, and they're going to be coming at you. And that was, the mental picture she had. Although, remember, the high desire person 3/4 of the time is the guy, but 1/4 of the time is actually the woman's the higher desire. So keep that in mind. Don't you just get it in your heads, ladies listening, that if you're the higher desire, there's something wrong with you. That's not true. But go back to this story. He comes to me privately and he says, our sex life is boring. It's just really boring. He said, I would much rather just look at porn and get into something really exciting. And it's a lot easier to get the hit that I need, So if I didn't have sex with my wife again, that would be just fine. Well, there's the ultimate slam dunk telling story of what addiction does to a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I appreciate you bringing that aspect of females up, because it's actually a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and I've heard it from pastors so often. I'm going to talk about porn here for a little bit. There's a guy. I'm talking to the guys. I'm just going to talk to the guys here. This is a guy's issue, and what it ends up doing is, well, one, it isn't true that it's simply a guy's issue.
Right.
Percentage-wise, it's higher for sure.
Yes.
So it's not true, but the other part of it is it makes the females who are struggling with this feel even more isolated and even more dirty.
Totally.
The reality is, in such a visual culture where this has been, intentionally put in places to be found so you can get hooked on porn, it's affecting everybody.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you bringing that up. This is for male and female listeners alike.
Yes.
This is a huge issue, period. Our culture is so sexualized and porn is so accessible. So many people are addicted to it. Some of our listeners might actually feel hopeless in it, right? Can't even conceive of a life without porn, where they wouldn't be hooked, had weeks or months of victory only to fall again at some particular season. And whether it's even possible, I guess another side of it is, in such a sexualized culture where it's everywhere, so easily accessible, some parents might think, like, is it even possible to keep my kids from coming across and getting addicted to porn themselves?
Sure.
What would you say to folks thinking that way about this issue?
So there's really two focuses in your question. And one is just a guy who's been hooked for a long time and he's got this despair thing going, I'll never get out of this. That's where many of the men start that we work with, right? Because they've tried so many times. I'm going to quit this time, and I'm going to stop this, and they'll do a couple of intermittent things that feels like, well, that's going to make the difference, and then they relapse again, and they go into despair zone. And matter of fact, just yesterday in the men's group I lead on Tuesday mornings online, I actually talk about the lies addicts tell themselves. Well, like it's just porn, there's all those positive sides, where they're making justification for it. Like it's not hurting anybody. What she doesn't know doesn't hurt her, and those kind of lines. But there's also the negative ones that say, I'll never get out of this. I've prayed and God hasn't answered my prayer. God could never forgive me. And they have all these scenarios in their mind that are really part of the damning inability to move forward because of the non-truth that they're carrying, the lies that they're believing. And so one of the things that the men and the women listening need to know, you can get out of it. First of all, biblically, God says that he will help us through that. There's no temptation that comes to us that isn't common to other people, and God is faithful. He will provide a way out of this. If we just surrender to him, he will give us this way out. Now, it's not hey, 3 weeks later, it's over. No, it's likely an 18-month journey to really get free of porn. But I tell this story with a lot of passion because we have what I call a 1,000-day club. That's men who have been clean from porn 1,000 days. That's almost 3 years. And I got 2 men already waiting for the next time we can have our breakfast, because I buy everybody breakfast in the 1,000-day club. We welcome the new guys. I got 2 guys waiting because we can't do the COVID thing right now, right? So we're not having our meetings. I got another guy that's about 60 days away from hitting 1,000. So by the time we can meet again, I already have 3 guys, ready to go. But you see, these men are getting free from it. The beautiful thing physiologically is that the brain it's the only organ of the body that has plasticity. Plasticity means it can actually be reshaped. You can't reshape a heart. You can't reshape a lung. You can't reshape a kidney. You can't reshape any other organ, but the brain actually can relearn and be reshaped. And so that neurological pathway that was so driven by the PMO cycle or acting out in other ways, so driven by your lusts and your fantasies, can actually be reprogrammed, and the brain will actually learn a new pathway that is honoring to God. And that is the hope that we come with. Yes, it is a huge addiction, and yes, we can say it is a sin, but it's also an emotional addiction. It's a dependency that I have in my heart and mind that I really can't get off this. And we tell these lies to ourselves. Why I did the talk yesterday, because all the lies that people tell themselves that just says, well, I'm stuck here, it'll never change, it's not that bad, and all those things. And so there's the one side about people looking at it. If they feel they've struggled, I'd like to enter in and say there is hope. But we should like to talk a little bit about the parents thing, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of parents that are like, how do I navigate this world? I'm one of them.
Yeah. How old are your boys?
11 and almost 9.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is
buying filters, trying to put parental stuff on devices. Yeah, it's like a part-time job.
Yeah. And listen,
talk regularly with my kids, just like, hey, you seen anything? Buddy's showing you stuff. You can always talk to me.
So if you go to our website, doingfamilyright.com, and you type in the word naked pictures. Now, on my website, don't type it in elsewhere.
Into Google.
Yeah, don't type it into Google. Go to my website. But I have an article called Naked Pictures. Why? Because the porn industry comes to our kids without being invited.
Yeah.
It pops up all over the place because they want to get kids hooked. And so what they do is they actually, this is a true story, the United Nations and the government of Sweden are 2 sites that were hijacked by porn people. So what happens is every year you got to, pay your $15 or whatever to keep your URL for your website. Okay. And so I always pay for it for 5 years so I don't have to worry about it. But if you let that relapse, it becomes available, and some people can actually buy that website. And if you click on, for instance, UN.com or whatever it was, or the government of Sweden, it went right to porn.
Oh my God.
Because they are trying to get people hooked in all kinds of ways. So all kinds of little kiddie games, kids will spell something wrong. So the porn industry actually gets the wrong spelling of, what is it called? Pandabear.com, which is a kid's thing. So they'll put pundabear.com, pindabear.com, or, some other weird spelling because you type it wrong and push enter, and it's now, whoa, what is this? Yep. They are after our kids.
Well, it's like being in COVID, right? The Zoom bombing that was happening earlier on, where they hack into Zoom conversations going on and show explicit porn, and kids were on some of these Zoom calls in school classes and stuff. It's just unbelievable.
And so what happens is, parents, if you're listening, I love you, but this naked pictures is a discussion you have to have with kids that are 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8.
Yep.
Before you have the full talk about porn, by age 9, by the way, the kids are going to run into naked pictures. And they know naked because, oh, look at you running around naked. You know, they're running around after a bath when they're 2 and 3, and they know the word, naked, cover yourself, whatever, and modesty and all that. So it's not a negative word. But what happens is I have an article about how parents can protect their kids when they inadvertently run into naked pictures. And so there's the first thing. For years and years, Matt, I used to coach parents. You need to have a talk to your kids about sexuality, including the porn thing, before age 11. And I'll tell you that I chose that because usually in grade 5 in school, they had the full kind of physiological sex talk by the teacher. And I wanted the kids to have the values and the perspective of the parents downloaded into their heart before they had the talk in school. Okay? And so for years, I just said, by age 11. Well, the problem is porn is coming to the kids before it gets talked about in school. And so Covenant Eyes, a wonderful ministry that helps by filtering questionable material on phones and computers, etc. I have it on my computer.
Yep, got it on all my stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. And it protects, like, my grandkids can't get on my computer and accidentally get to anything questionable because it'll block them. But they have done their research, and the average age that little boys are now getting into porn is 9.5. And because of that, the last about 7 or 8 years, I've now changed from age 11. It's got to go down to age 9.
Well, you want to set the terms on the conversation before they find it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's tricky.
Yeah. Matter of fact, Matt, there's an article on my website. I actually have 7 articles on how to do the sex talk.
Nice.
Even podcasts on talking to your kids about porn. But the one article I think is maybe my best in this series is the second one, called Creating a Framework. Teaching your kids about a sexual framework. Mm-hmm. And so picture, in some, what I would call, when I grew up, the older dentist office had this oak frame coat rack in the corner. And you would come in, you'd hang your parkas and, scarves and stuff on this corner coat rack in the corner, right? And so what happens is, when done well, every topic that a kid's going to hear on the playground, there's a place on the coat rack. Someone brings up, oh, I know what that swear word is. My dad that said that's for the female anatomy part. We shouldn't use that word. That's slang. We know what word that is, right? That word there, that's another bad word. Dad said that. Or, there's other things, when they hear the word masturbation for the first time. Well, oh no, Dad talked about that. And there's a place to hang all the stuff they're going to hear on the coat rack that Dad did for the boys and Mom did for the girls, so that this framework is, there is nothing that they'll run into that we haven't got a place for them to hang it, that it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it's such a wise thing to do.
Yeah. It's a very nuanced conversation. I agree 100%. And I think the age needs to be young. It's such a nuanced conversation because sometimes parents' attempts to have the sex talk kind of comes off as like, I'm going to freak these kids out about it, or I'm going to talk about sex and I'm going to talk about it in negative terms. Right. Stay away from it. This is this is not for you. I've done premarital counseling and met with couples in our church, just being a pastor long enough. There's this other side of it, which is they were told it was bad for so long. They get married, and now all of a sudden it's supposed to be a good, and they can't flip that switch.
Exactly.
And so it's a nuanced conversation in the sense that, like, we want to be able to set the parameters as parents and as Christian parents, and to say sex is good. It's made by God. It's a wonderful thing. It's, for a man and a woman, and having this conversation and talking about it in those terms, and then also building in the guards and stuff like that. And it's helpful with the coat rack thing and just talking about just educating them on what stuff is, that they can place it and figure it out. And, dad knows about this stuff.
Yes.
Some good advice I got, and I'm trying to instill in my boys, is to talk about it. And I want my boys to stay away from porn. And I want to do everything I can to keep them from, and I tell them that.
Yeah.
And I also try and reiterate with them and say, if you see naked pictures or videos, come tell me. I will be so proud of you.
Yes.
And say, try and create that environment where that's on me, and so you can feel safe. So I want to apologize to my boys if they come across that and say, Dad let you down.
Yes.
And come to me and let me know that Dad let you down.
Yes.
I'll be so proud of you.
Yes.
And that actually changes the dynamic of the conversation where it's unspoken. I don't think Mom and Dad even know what masturbation is. They've never talked to me about it, so I can't talk to them about it. Right. Where I saw something and I feel excited, but I also feel ashamed.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to keep this private, or I'm just going to tell my buddies, but I'm not going to talk to Dad. Yeah. It's creating that environment. Emily and I wonder sometimes if we've talked too much about it, because it's a regular dinner time conversation where they're like, what does this word mean? We're like, whoa. But it's open. You kind of want that at the same time. But dinner conversations are lively in the Sean's household these days.
let me just say to you, Matt, that we could co-edit a magazine for parents on talking to kids about the struggle with porn, because what you said is the heart of the Naked Pictures article.
Cool.
It's the heart of it. That when I talk to kids about sex, because I have traveled for years and done that, or even I have a talk, what porn is doing to your future sex life and marriage.
Yeah, that's so helpful.
But here's how I started. I said, let's get the facts straight.
Yep.
God created sex, and he wants your future sex life and marriage to be awesome. And I say, kids, it's amazing. And I'm an old guy, but it's amazing. And I want you to know.
You're a Jeepa.
Yeah, I'm a Jeepa. Yeah. But here's what's crazy. They can say, oh, listen, don't go there. And so it has this, as you said, nuance of there's something wrong with it or it's bad, right? And I want them to hear, no, listen, God created sex. Yep. But what happens is the enemy tries to pervert it and sidetrack it in all kinds of different complicated ways, right? And even your line about it's my fault, I at least every 2 months, a parent comes forward and says, Dave, we got a problem. What's that? We just found our 11-year-old looking at porn. I says, okay, what do we do? I says, well, it's your approach right now that's going to make the difference.
Yes.
And the approach is this. You go home to your kid and you say, I'm really sorry that you're looking at that as on me. It's my fault. I'm sorry. We didn't protect you. We didn't coach you. We didn't teach you well enough. And it's all on me. I'm sorry. There's no shame on you. It's all on me.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot of curiosity to understand sexuality, and there's a lot of junk out there. So something as beautiful as God created, we need to talk to you about so that you get a good, healthy perspective on it. But so there's lots of articles and podcasts on our website that can help parents in this whole journey of talking to kids about sex, and even the specific one, what do you do if your kid starts looking at porn? How do you handle that? That's there in detail too.
I was 10 years old, so I'll give away my age here. I guess I was like 1992 or something like that. And my dad was a professor, and he had a sabbatical year, and he was studying in Germany. So our whole family uprooted and spent a year in Germany in my grade 5 year, 10 years old. And Europe's just different, or at least it was, right? So we'd be watching TV, and it wouldn't be a shampoo commercial of the woman's head and her hair. It would be her whole body. On my way to school every day on the bus, there would be this huge fragrance billboard, and it was like a topless woman. And I was 10 years old, and it was unspoken. We'd never talk about this stuff. And I would just see it, and I'd be, I probably was just gawking at it, right? But you're not really having a framework for that. Yes. But that was my first exposure in that year, right? And so the fact that was in the early 90s, before the dawn of like internet traffic and porn sites, and so you're talking about ages and stuff. I think about my boys as 11 and 9, and if I first saw it at 10 in the 90s. We need to be having these conversations and wisely. And I think what we've just talked about in terms of how we respond will either create a distance and our kids not wanting to come to us or thinking they can. Mom and dad are mad at me, angry at me, I did something bad, or setting the table and saying, we love you, thank you for talking about it, let's talk more, and let's set up an environment that's so important. That's a critical thing I'd want parents to hear. It says in Psalm 119, how can a young man keep his way pure? By guarding it according to your word. I'd love to just talk as followers of Jesus, how does our Christian faith intersect with the concept of pornography?
That exact verse talks about, just in the context there, it says, and thy word, your word I've hid in my heart that I might not sin against you. And so what happens is, the more I lay down God's truth in my heart, in my mind, the more I understand that God has a plan for my purity. One of the talks I did to a bunch of men one time that was quite, I thought, profound was, can passion and purity coexist? Because you see, God tells me I need to be a man who's pure, and God tells me that passion, towards my wife is a good thing. But how does passion and purity coexist? And because God created both. He desires our purity. He also created the passions that we enjoy. And so in this journey, I think what happens is the young man, young woman, even the older person. I'm actually working with someone battling with porn and struggling, who's 76 right now too. And it's been in his life a long time.
So there's another lie or myth. It's like, I'll just age out of this.
You'll grow out of this. Not likely. But I think what happens is God understands our complexities more than we understand our complexities. And God at the heart knows that we struggle with things. And there's this overwhelming understanding we need to have that God loves me and actually wants to see my freedom. And he approaches it from coming alongside and says, come on, Dave, come on, Matt, let me help you beyond this, right? This isn't good for you. It's not good for your marriage. It's not good for your future. Let's work beyond this. And I honestly thought, when I was a teenager and struggling with, just the growing up, discovery of the masturbation and fantasy thoughts and all, because the very hyper-conservative church I was from that would talk so negatively about sex, like it's wrong, it's bad, it's of the devil. Okay, seriously, I heard that. So I'm thinking, well, holy man, I really thought that the Lord would send a train off the tracks. And my house wasn't nowhere near any trains. But I literally figured on my walk to school today, today's the day that the Lord will send a train off the tracks, come down my street and run me over, or a plane will fall out of the sky and kill me because I'm the only one in the world that struggles with this, and I'm the lousiest Christian in the world, and all I was a 15-year-old kid wanting to follow Jesus, and no one had coached me about how to handle my sexual passion. Nobody coached me. Yeah. I love mom and dad, but the only thing I got from my dad, they're both with Jesus, was when I was in grade 5 going down to the school to, skate around, in the Friday night evening skate and maybe hold a little grade 5 girl's hand, my dad would say this: "No messing around, son. No messing around." And I was supposed to know what that meant.
Fill in all the gaps.
Fill in all the gaps. That was my sexual training. No messing around. That was it. Okay. So I ain't going to tell my dad anything.
Pat on the back and send him it was good we had that talk.
I had the talk, right? And so I want people to walk in, here's what's encouraging. If King David had the affair with Bathsheba and had her husband murdered, that's a real sinister, sinful mess. Yep. And it was after that God says, here's a man after my own heart. Yep. So there isn't a person listening who hasn't done something that God can't forgive. Yep. And so I want you to know that God starts from the premise, I love you, I understand your garbage, I will love you through this. Come to me, all you who are burdened with your porn and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I will help you through this.
Yeah, we begin to believe a lie if we think we're beyond grace. Like grace has no limits. That's the beauty of the gospel. Grace meets the humble and needy in their distress.
Yes.
We can say to Jesus, my record is a mess. Your record is perfect. I need your grace. Yes. And I think what we find there is in our desperation, in our need, is we find forgiving grace. And And if we seek it, we find empowering grace
Yes.
to help us in the battle.
Yes.
Victory, fighting sin. And like you say, 18 months, kind of giving it a time. Let's be real about this.
Yes.
Don't say a pithy prayer in the dark one night, not do anything else about
That's
it,
right.
and expect
That's right.
God will just fix me now.
Yeah.
You talked about being that 15-year-old kid, and there's something about pornography too, and this idea that not just porn, but sin in the dark,
Yes.
it thrives.
Yes.
And the devil loves that.
That's right.
And so, kind of for a context for this, just in your own life, those who might be listening, if you're battling porn, just an encouragement to kind of rehearse the gospel. Rehearse the gospel in the sense of like, Jesus died for me.
Yes.
For sins like this one that I'm experiencing, and come and seek repentance, that kind of examine your pattern of sin. You look at, okay, what are the circumstances? Am I feeling like, kind of
Bored,
slighted by my
rejected.
spouse,
Yeah.
bored. Exactly. Boredom is what leads a lot of people to work. Or the pattern is, and you've talked about this before. It's like, oh, it seems to be late at night when you're up, and it's always at this time, or it's these scenarios.
Yeah.
Kind of examine your pattern of sin, unfiltered access, those kinds of things, and what are some ways that you could start to combat that. But the other and third piece of it, which I think is really hard for people to do, especially in the church when we know this stuff is sin, is to actually confess it. And like porn thrives when it's secret sin. So confess it to God and confess it to someone else.
That's exactly right.
Is absolutely huge. But there's hope. There's grace. There's forgiving grace. And there's also, like I said, the kind of grace that empowers us to fight this stuff.
Exactly.
It says in 1 Corinthians, you were washed. You were cleansed. You've been sanctified, justified. That's the truth of the gospel. And porn is not beyond that. One more thing, I'm going to invite you to give some practical steps at the end, some responses people can have. But what would you say to the spouse who you talked about that one scenario where the two individuals, the couple came to you one at a time? But what would you say to the hurting spouse who's feeling rejected and has a spouse who's wrapped up in this?
Yeah, give me 20 seconds to just affirm what you said earlier, and then I'll just really love those.
Affirm me all you want, Dave.
Yeah,
I love being
exactly. But people struggling with porn have to break the silence. When I speak at men's retreats, I might speak, Saturday morning at the retreat about the struggle with porn and lust and all. And I say, before the night is out, break the silence to tell someone. Because power grows in secret. And if I keep the secret, I will keep stuck. I have to break the power. That's why all the one another passages in the Bible are there.
Yeah.
We always say men make men. Okay? We need other people to be wingmen, we call them, who are going to walk with me through this. And once we get over the shame and the sense of regret and failure and realize that other men are struggling. Like I thought at 15 I was the only kid that had this battle in the world, only realized it was likely 95% had the battle, but no one was talking about it. And that's the beauty of reaching out and breaking the silence. So I just so agree with what you said there. Partners, you're a spouse of a man who's struggling with porn. And you might catch him, or you might ask, and you see the look on his face. He's still struggling with it. It might even be more complicated because you know that he's acting out not just with himself, but maybe outside the marriage or online with some connecting with people. And who knows? It's just there's so many variations of the hurt that's possible. Women whose husbands are struggling, you're experiencing what's called partner betrayal trauma. The unfaithfulness due to his addiction. I'm not a porn addict. Well, okay, you have a sexual preoccupation then. But the point is, women, it just feels so rejecting. It feels so minimizing. It feels like there's something wrong with you, and it's just you're not being pursued, and or the sex feels all about him, and there's. The level of hurts that women can carry, and it's really tough because the addiction of this man, it's not about them. It's not their fault. These women, it wouldn't matter who he would have married. He has to work this out with somebody. And so because, let's just say age 12, he got hooked into porn and he got married at 26. So that's 14 years of the addiction. And then at 29, 30, it kind of comes out that he's still struggling with this and it's not over. Well, by then he's already 16, 18 years having looked at porn. And so it's not going to be a stiff talking to one day and it's over. It's going to be a journey for him to get out of that. And it hurts you bad. I tried to explain recently to a group of women, because I have a program called Purge, which is all about partner encouragement recovery group experience. We teach women in a crash course Friday, all day Saturday, 11 hours of teaching, how to stand or work through this hurt you have, and then or learn to stand with your husband through this hellish thing. But I described it recently as you've been in the car with your husband. You've even been warning him about slowing down. You're driving a little fast. You're a little reckless on this. And of course, I'm talking about the marital faithfulness and all. And the car rolls and you're upside down in the ditch and you're bleeding and busted and everything. And it wasn't your fault. You weren't driving and he wasn't listening to the worries. And now you have this crazy marital car wreck because of this addiction. And so it wasn't your fault. And you're not to blame, but you have incredible healing that you're going to have to go through and work through. So women who are listening, go to the website and purge. Just type in the word purge and you'll find a support group that meets Tuesday nights to help partners of men who are struggling with porn or sexual addiction.
That's really helpful. It's not all bad news. In 2019, in Christianity Today, Lyman Stone wrote an article called "Conservative Protestant Men Are Still Resisting Porn," and actually was encouraged by some statistics that were showing, like, if you are committed, not nominal, but a committed follower of Jesus, regular attender in church, when we could do such things, the statistics are actually lower. Right. That being said, so there's encouragement there, but that being said, it's an issue in the church like it is everywhere.
100%.
I was at a men's retreat that you were speaking at years ago. And probably the line I remember most clearly was you were saying, it was an indictment. You were saying the reason more men aren't serving in the church and leading in the church is because they're secretly addicted to porn.
That's right.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah. And you know what? I'd be more convinced than ever talking, 10 years later or more longer, because I look into the men's eyes, who I look at them, and so much about them is good. He's got a good heart. He loves Jesus. You can see it. But there's this grip on him, like a power grip that he can't get out of. And so he's not gonna lead a care group, because the truth is he feels like a sham. He hasn't dealt with this, and he doesn't know how. No one talks about it. And it's so anathema to open up about these things. And so where do you do that? So these men, they live in silence, trying to battle porn on their own, and they will not step into leadership because they feel like, well, I don't deserve to be there. I'm struggling with this, and so these are really good men that they need to address this like any other issue in a person's life. It's not the unpardonable. It is an addiction, so it's a mix between sin and addiction, and even the psychological draw of it, not just the physiological draw. It's complicated to get out of that because of this huge grip, and I'm just grabbing my wrist like you would grab a toddler at the side of the road when you're going to cross the street. You grab that grip and you won't let go. That's what the addiction is. And so many men are hesitant to serve and don't even lead their families well. Sometimes don't even feel like they have a right to pray, because they don't like being this hypocrite. Deal with it. Yeah. And God wants to use you. Amen.
This conversation has been so rich, Dave. You're such a rich resource on this stuff. For those who are listening who are local in the Fraser Valley, you're in Abbotsford, got a ministry based out of there. You've talked about some of the things you put on, some of the courses and helps. Can you just describe a little bit more for those that are, whether it's they themselves or they have a spouse who's addicted, or they're trying to wrestle this stuff as parents? Just some resources for them.
Yeah. A really interesting story. A lady heard about our program in a province a couple away in Saskatchewan, and she reached out and said, "We need help in our marriage. Really serious sexual addiction my husband has." And as things ricocheted around, the daughter-in-law reached out to her mother-in-law, so that her husband's mom, and told that she was getting help from us. And just this week, the mom reached out with her husband, and her line to me was, I'm married to a man who's addicted, and through all this mess, both of our boys are addicted. We need help as a family. And so we pass on the garbage to the next generation without even talking about it. It was normalized in one home to some degree, and both boys are addicted. I'm working with 2 generations now. So it's doingfamilyright.com. We have people trained on our staff to counsel people through the problem of sexual addiction. By fall, there will be 4 of us who have our certification as a sexual recovery therapist or coach. And we have 3 different groups that meet for men every week to help them through the recovery. We have a group for women partners called Purge, and a psychoeducational seminar that we offer a couple of times a year to do crash course for partners. So counseling is available. Resources, we're resource rich, all kinds of podcasts, videos, articles on everything you want to ask. We talk about, and we're not the only thing around. There's other places that you can get help from, but I want you to know that there's trusted, God-honoring help at doingfamilyright.com on all things on recovery.
Yeah, you guys are world class, and it's great to have you in our neck of the woods. And not only that, just want listeners to know, you touched on the one another's, and that's a huge aspect of all of this. You are not alone in this.
Yes.
As an individual, as a couple, as parents.
Yes.
Reach out. Your local church cares. We want to walk this stuff through with you, want to help you, want to serve you, want to encourage you. And then resources like Doing Family Right are just absolutely phenomenal. Dave, I'm going to sort out my footwear issue. And then I'd love to see you on the links sometime.
Good.
Redeem myself.
Yeah, well, you'll have a lot of work to redeem yourself, but I love you. I love you, and I'd golf with you any day. And we can hack and whack away around there. And I just want to say one thing to close, Matt. I love your heart to love your people.
Yeah, thanks.
I love your heart to speak truth. I love your heart to love well and be open to talk about complicated things. And we shouldn't be ashamed to talk about what God wasn't ashamed to create. So that when you talk openly about this, I'm just proud of you as a big brother in the Lord. And Central, you got a good pastor here. Treat him well. Treat him well. Treat him well in Jesus' name. Thanks.
Go to doingfamilyright.com to learn more about how Dave and his team can support you in your desire for relational wholeness with God and others. A couple of quick updates about Deep Thoughts before we go. First, there are no more seasons to the podcast. Instead, episodes will be released every 2 to 3 weeks or so. In addition, we're going to be releasing short episodes called A Deep Thought. That'll be just that. A deep thought on some aspect of the Christian faith, typically in like 5 minutes or less. Those will be on occasion and will fill some of the gaps between full-length episodes. Finally, on the topic of full-length episodes, I'm thrilled to let you know that Rebecca McLaughlin will be on the podcast to talk about Confronting Christianity, which was named the 2020 Beautiful Orthodoxy Book of the Year by Christianity Today. And we'll also talk about her forthcoming book, 10 Questions Every Teen Should Ask and Answer About Christianity. Now, I've got to be honest with you. I wrote Rebecca requesting an interview every season of the podcast I've done. I wrote her every season hoping she'd be on, and I never got a response until recently. She apologized for not getting back to me because she was in writing mode and wasn't responding to email. I apologize for hounding her. And we had a fantastic conversation that I can't wait to share with you next time on Deep Thoughts. Talk to you then.
Very deep. Thank you.